Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shelley Huang, a junior student from Chicago International School. To begin with, I will invite all of you to do a little activity with me. Okay. So I have a friend whose name is Chris. And here are a few statements about Chris. Please picture what Chris would most likely to look like according to these statements. Number 1, Chris likes to go to the gym. Number 2, Chris is a straight-A student. And number 3, Chris is a rapper. Please pick the picture that you think looks closest to my friend, Chris. The answer is D, because Chris is a girl. Now, let's do another activity together. Please close your eyes and focus on what your mind tells you, okay? If I say the sport football, what is the picture in your head? This is a commercial by Orange, a French telecommunication corporation aiming to eliminate people's stereotypes on female football players. People often think women's footballs are less skillful, entertaining, and thus do not go to their games. But that does not necessarily mean they're less virtuoso or less than men. Don't get me wrong. I do acknowledge that there's differences between men and women due to their physical disparity. And that's why women compete with women and not with men in sports. However, in this video, the biggest difference we see upon them isn't their physical disparity nor their football skills, but their sex. In other words, it seems like we don't draw the line between the two sexes by meritocracy, but by stereotyping. So why is gender stereotyping so important to know? Why should we know about that? If I give you a blank piece of paper and ask you to write a sentence about a place where you have never been to, or even know little about without the access to the internet, can you do it? Probably not that hard. But how about 100 words? 1,000 words? 1,000 words? You might still be able to do it, but probably not really reliable or accurate, right? This is the same with gender stereotyping. If women and men cannot step out of gender stereotyping, but rather only judge each other based on these imaginary standards, how do we understand each other? This lack of understanding leads to tension and conflicts between people, as hardly we can walk in the shoes of understanding and respect. More importantly, gender stereotyping germinates seeds of inequality and limiting potentials. Starting from a young age, what we have exposed to have already shaped our schemas of what it means to be man or women, or cognitive presentations, if you could call it so, inducing the first primary prototype of gender stereotyping. And what's that, you may ask? Well, toys. If you search toys for girls, you're gonna see this. And if you do the same for boys, you're gonna see this. It seems like even the algorithm assumes all girls like pink and like to color their nails. And all boys want to become airplane engineers or car mechanics. This reminds me of the Toys R Us that was near my house and had always colored the girl toy section with pink. Bright pink, Barbie pink, and pink glitters, and all these little pink bow knots are so pink, as if you're Alice in the Rose Garden and surrounded by flamingos. And it's the same for Legos. If you walk into the Legos girls area, you're gonna see pet stores, beauty salons, and castles that are all bright colored. But for boys, you're gonna see all the cool race cars, rocket ships, police stations, and fire stations. Like what the company predicted little girls would like, I had all these pet stores, beauty salons, and castle Legos. However, preferring pink or Barbie or beauty salons or dinosaurs, race cars, or airplane models are not wrong at all. The problem is, gender stereotyping leaves people with little rooms to pursue and discover what they like. I've seen boys who like pink, but will not admit to that because if they took one step outside their house, they will be immediately reminded that pink is exclusive to female, as almost every infrastructure you can associate with women is pink. I've seen girls who want to become firefighters and police women, but that was wear off because our society seems not to be very supportive and only depicts strong, bulk men to be the representation. People kept telling women, oh, they cannot be in positions because they're not strong enough, or they're not tall enough, or fast enough. Not enough compared to men. And yet, female firefighters were still fulfilling their duty when 9/11 happened, but were overlooked by their male counterparts. As I grew up, sometimes I wondered if I really liked these Legos, or the bodies I had. Or it's just, I was never offered a choice. It all begins with toys, but that's not the end. Schooling plays a major role in shaping gender stereotyping. Our society likes to teach women and men differently. And I will not judge whether this is right or not, but let's see the impact of doing so. 8 years ago, Rishima Sajani, the CEO of a Girls Who Code, stood on the stage of TEDx and addressed the problem. And yet, we're still encountering the same problem today, and that is the disparity between how we teach our boys and girls. We're teaching our boys to be brave, but teaching our girls to be perfect, she said. Women are not encouraged to take risks, while men are. They're capable and they're facilitated to be courageous, and are rewarded for them. The HP report suggested by Sajani indicates that women only apply for a job when they're 100% qualified, while men hit 60% of the bars. From this, it is evident that our society expects women to be perfect, while expecting the men should be risk takers. But what if a man finds it makes more sense for him to play it safe? And a woman wants to take more risks and be challenged? Why should our society impede them from doing so? Under this gender stereotyping and societal expectations, most men feel like they must be accomplished or courageous or a game changer, while most women do not acquire confidence adequately that will capacitate them to fight hard, to urge for personal goals and be ambitious while not worrying about failures. That's where the problem is. But I would argue that this tenet for girls to aim for perfection impose a much greater impact on women, and that is clearly illustrated in our daily lives. Under this social norm, we often question our self-efficacy and are more susceptible to other people's voices, even if we're sufficiently skillful in the work we're doing. We will think, oh, what if we failed? What if we cannot make it? Or what if people think I'm not good enough? And we suppress our voices, our feelings, and our actions. But is anyone perfect? I don't think so. Then why are we not teaching everyone to deal with imperfections, failures, and learn to self-advocate, but only teaching our girls to fit into an imaginary standard after another? Why our society encourages people to prop for their potential? Women are left behind to break the glass ceiling. Shackles are imposed on women with the fostering inequality in between how we teach them. No doubt, the difference in how we teach them will lead to greater disparity between the two sexes. So why do gender stereotypes happen? As I've mentioned, there are many examples of gender labeling and tagging in our society. But why? This is because we like to personify a lot of things we use in our lives. And by this, I mean, we like to draw a clear line between what's masculine and what's feminine, and we indulge these characteristics onto the object we use. Clear relationships are established for what is it you like, or what you should like if you are a girl. And it's the same for boys. It almost seems like G in girls stands for graceful, gentle, and gorgeous. And B in boys stands for bold, brave, and bouncy. There seems to be a pre-programmed code telling people what you should prefer based on your gender. And jumping out of that stereotypical box will lead to stigmatization. Now, just last week when I was studying in the library, I overheard a conversation between a boy and their parents when they were browsing on their phone, buying a birthday present for the boy. The boy wanted a set of cooking toys, and his parents were like, sure, let's get that. And when I heard that, I was like, great, finally someone challenging gender stereotyping. And that's where the irony kicked in. His parents immediately said, oh wait, this is too pink for boys. Let's see if they have blue. And that's it. It was like suddenly falling into a hole on the ground I mistakenly did not see. Since when blue has been tied to boys and bounded with manhood? It's funny if you think about it because no one ever made such conclusion. And yet, we're so used to outlining masculinity and femininity in our lives. We're like game characters living in a programmed game, ruled by such classification system. And rather for gender to be solely a social construct that structures our society, I wonder if we are the ones who are being structured into the binary social construct and conform to all these social expectations and roles that seems to be inherently not decided by us, but by the nature of the world's functionality. After we talk about gender stereotyping, its reasons and examples of this in our life, one thing seems to stood out to me, and that is stereotyping. We know why gender stereotyping happens, but what about stereotyping? What is that all about? Well, stereotyping is a preconceived notion or generalization about a group, and there are cognitive beliefs which can lead to prejudices and discriminations. But they're not the same things. Prejudices and discriminations are the phenomenon we find in our society due to our stereotypical thinking habits. And how are they formed? You may ask. Did they just come out in the middle of nowhere? No. As compromisers, humans like to take the easier thinking approach, or use system one thinking that's intuitive. And when new information isn't put into our brain, what do we need to do? We need to categorize them, we need to classify them in order to better understand. And this categorization is related to a thing called availability heuristic. Now, I know these are some really big words. So before I dive into the definition of it, we can do a little activity that will clearly illustrate the concept. I will ask you a question, and you need to think about the answer in a countdown of 3. Okay. Please give me a name of a fast food restaurant that sells burgers and fries. Please raise your hand if your answer is McDonald's. Yeah, that's where availability heuristic is. It is the cognitive bias or ease or availability of a thing that pops in your mind when you think of an associate, like McDonald's. It influences people's decision-making and judgments. And it can be deciding what's a brand that fits in the activity we just did, or a color, an item, or specific characteristics. And these specific characteristics you can think of, or outlets you can think of, they can be stereotypes. However, it is important to acknowledge that cognitive biases do not equal to stereotyping, but rather influence them. So why do we use stereotypes? Why do we even use any type of cognitive heuristics if they can be so faulty? Well, every day, we make an average about 35,000 decisions and we process them. How many decisions is that for a person's entire life? It's enormous. Therefore, We use stereotypes and any cognitive heuristics to help us to better classify or generalize or group things because they're effortless and intuitive, and most of the times they do work well. And that's human nature. It's okay. We're all lazy thinkers. However, the sole usage of this thinking habit can lead to an over-classifying of information. And we see this on misinformation and misjudgment of both women and men by society, stimulating the gap between the two sexes and limiting people's pursuit of their real passion. So stereotyping. Although they're helpful when making decisions, they can have long-lasting impacts on people and society. And gender stereotyping is the same, as it is imposing people to fit into one fixed model after another, programmed by banal social expectations, wielding its power. So finally, what is it we can do to eliminate gender stereotyping? It doesn't have to be something big or impactful like going to the UN and make a speech that appeals to the world. The magic is relatively simple. Here's a manual you could use to counter gender stereotyping. Step 1, acknowledgement. To be honest, if we can recognize the existence of gender stereotyping and the fact that we're impacted by cognitive biases, it is already an 8% or more a success. We simply need to be aware of our tendency to be influenced by cognitive biases. Step 2, pause and reflect. When you find yourself making judgments about someone's behaviors or hobbies or clothing styles, pause for a moment and don't let yourself get lynched by the intuitive thinking. Rather, reflect on whether these judgments are being made fairly or they're just influenced by biases or stereotypes. Step 3, challenge assumptions. Question assumptions that are made about you or others, and ask yourself if these judgments are made fair, based on actual knowledge or evidence, or they're just simply influenced by societal expectations or stereotypes. And step 4, celebrate diversity. Our world is diverse, and that means there's always people jumping out of imposed stereotypical boxes, and we should be proud of who we are like they did. We should celebrate our diversity. We should be proud of who we are, what we like, and don't feel bad that we're not the same as other people, as stereotypes would suggest. We celebrate our diversity, and it is the diversity and differences between people that's the real beauty which makes up our world. Last, gender stereotyping is not something that can be changed overnight. And sometimes in life, one lesson we must learn is how to cope with things, or deal with things, and live with things that cannot be changed easily. To coexist. But as long as we're aware of it and simply acknowledge its existence, the needle will be shifted eventually. Thank you.